The fuel gauge kissed a quarter tank somewhere past mile marker 214, and I made a decision I'll regret for the rest of my life. I kept driving. I should have stopped at that Sinclair station 40 miles back, the one with the handwritten sign advertising night crawlers and diesel. But the place looked wrong. Not closed. Wrong. The fluorescent canopy lights buzzed in broad daylight. The pumps stood open with nozzles dangling off their cradles, and a sedan sat parked diagonally across two spaces, with its driver door hanging wide. No people, not a single person. I told myself it was a slow Tuesday afternoon in rural Wyoming, and people around here just didn't care about parking etiquette. I told myself a lot of things that day. My name is Garrett Cole. I'm 34. I drive a 2019 Ram 2500 with a camper shell. And on October 7th, I was hauling a load of salvaged copper wire from a demolition job in Cheyenne back to my partner's warehouse in Billings. Marcus and I had been running the reclamation business for 3 years, pulling wire, fixtures, and plumbing out of condemned buildings and flipping it to scrap yards. It wasn't glamorous. It paid the bills, kept me moving, and gave me a reason to wake up at 5 in the morning, which was more than I could say for the 2 years before that. The interstate was emptier than usual. I'd noticed it vaguely the way you notice a room temperature dropping, not as a thought, but as a sensation. Where there should have been clusters of semis grinding north, I counted maybe 6 in 2 hours. A few southbound cars passed with unusual urgency, but highway speed is highway speed. You can't always read intent through a windshield at a combined closure rate of 140 miles per hour. My phone sat in the cup holder, connected to the truck's Bluetooth, cycling through a playlist Marcus had made called Drive Angry. Halfway through a clutched track, the music cut to a tone I'd never heard. Not an Amber Alert chime, not a weather warning. 3 ascending notes followed by a flat digital voice. Civil emergency. Shelter in place. Avoid contact with symptomatic individuals. Do not approach hospitals or emergency services. This message will repeat. I stared at the phone like it owed me money. Then I picked it up and tried to call Marcus. The call connected on the 4th ring. "You get that alert?" I said. "Garrett, where are you?" 2:20 on a 25, maybe 90 minutes south of the Montana line. "What's going on?" "Don't stop driving." His voice was different. Marcus was a former offensive lineman for Montana State's 6'4", 270, the kind of man who used humor as structural reinforcement. He wasn't using humor. "Listen to me carefully. Lena called from Billings General an hour ago. She said they locked the ER down, not protocol lockdown. The staff barricaded the trauma wing with gurneys and filing cabinets. She said patients were attacking other patients." "Attacking how?" "Biting, Garrett. Biting and not stopping." I let the words sit between us like a loaded weapon on a kitchen table. Lena was Marcus's wife and a charge nurse with 16 years of trauma experience. She did not exaggerate. She did not use imprecise language. She said the ones who got bitten went down with fevers inside of 20 minutes and came back up wrong. Nonverbal, aggressive. She used the word feral. I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel. The asphalt ahead stretched flat and indifferent to the horizon. "Marcus, that sounds like..." "I know what it sounds like. I need you to not say it out loud, because the second we name it, we have to accept it. And I'm not ready to accept it while my wife is still inside that hospital." "Is she still there now?" The silence that followed was surgical. It removed something from the conversation that neither of us could put back. "I don't know," he said. "She stopped answering 40 minutes ago." I pressed the accelerator until the needle touched 85. The copper in the truck bed shifted and groaned. Somewhere behind me, the empty Sinclair station kept its lights on for no one. 20 miles later, the road told me everything the emergency alert wouldn't. The first vehicle I came upon was a Greyhound bus angled into the median, its front axle buried in the soft earth like a dog digging for something it would never find. The emergency exit at the rear hung open. Luggage dotted the grass in a scattered trail leading toward the fence line. Suitcases, a child's backpack printed with cartoon dinosaurs, a leather duffel split at the seam. No passengers, no driver. I slowed but didn't stop. That instinct, the one that tells you observation is safer than involvement, saved me more times in the next 72 hours than any weapon or wall. A mile beyond the bus, a state trooper's cruiser sat on the shoulder with its light bar still cycling. Red and blue swept across the dead grass in lazy rotation. The driver's side window was shattered inward, the pattern of the breakage suggesting something had come through it from outside. I could see the interior. The seat was empty. I did not look at the stains. My phone buzzed. Not Marcus. A text from my younger sister, Dawn, in Bozeman. "Are you safe? Mom and Dad aren't picking up. I'm scared. Tyler went to check on the neighbors and hasn't come back." Tyler was her husband. 28, high school shop teacher. Built like a distance runner with the temperament of a golden retriever. The kind of man who would absolutely go check on his neighbors during a crisis and absolutely not come back if something was waiting for him. I called Dawn. It rang once, twice, then connected to a silence that bristled with presence. "Dawn, I'm here." Her voice was compressed, barely above a breath. "I'm in the upstairs bathroom with Cody. The door is locked." Cody was 4, my nephew. He called me Gar Bear and believed with absolute conviction that I was the strongest person alive. "Where's Tyler?" I watched him walk across the street to the Munoz's house. He knocked. The door was already open. He went inside and I heard... She stopped. I could hear Cody in the background asking a question I couldn't make out. Dawn answered him in the bright, false tone parents use to construct normalcy from wreckage. "We're playing the quiet game, baby, remember?" "What did you hear, Dawn?" "Glass breaking. Then nothing. Then someone came out of the Munoz's front door, but it wasn't Tyler. It moved wrong, Garrett. The legs were stiff, but it was fast. It crossed the yard and went to the next house and just pushed through the screen door like it wasn't there. One person? At first. There are more now. I can see the street from the bathroom window. There are maybe 8 of them, just walking. Not together, not apart. They move toward sounds. A car alarm went off on the next block, and they all turned at once, like birds. I did the math I didn't want to do. Bozeman was 3.5 hours from my current position. Billings was 90 minutes. Marcus needed me. Dawn needed me. The fuel gauge was sinking like a confession. "I'm coming to get you," I said. "Don't go to Billings first. I have to pass through." "Garrett, Billings is bad. I saw posts before the cell network started crawling. The hospital was overrun by noon. There are roadblocks on the 90 interchange. Please, come straight to Bozeman." I pulled up the map in my head. If I cut west on Highway 312 before reaching Billings proper, I could arc through Laurel and catch I-90 westbound without entering the city center. It added 40 minutes, but kept me away from whatever was happening at the hospital where Lena had stopped answering her phone. Lock every door and window in the house. Fill the bathtub with water. Take the heaviest object you can swing and keep it next to you. I'll be there before dark. Promise me. I'll be there. I ended the call and stared at the road. 87 miles per hour. A quarter tank minus whatever I'd burned having a crisis. The math didn't work, and I drove into it anyway. The town of Sheridan appeared and vanished in 4 minutes. That's how I knew. Sheridan, Wyoming is not a town you pass through without noticing. It sits along the interstate with enough commercial sprawl to register gas stations, fast food, a Walmart visible from the highway. On any normal day, the exit ramps would carry a current of local traffic, trucks fueling up, families on road trips pulling off for bathrooms and chicken nuggets. Today the ramps were blocked, not by barricades, by vehicles. Cars had piled up at the bottom of the off-ramp in a compression pattern that told me everyone had tried to exit at once and no one had gotten through. A pickup truck had mounted the guardrail, trying to bypass the jam, its rear wheels still spinning lazily in the air. On the overpass above the interstate, a woman stood at the railing holding a sheet of plywood with spray-painted words I read in the half-second my trajectory allowed. "Don't stop. They're in the Walmart." I didn't stop. Beyond Sheridan, the terrain opened into the long, rolling emptiness that precedes the Montana border. The Bighorn Mountains rose to the west, indifferent and ancient. I'd driven this stretch 40 times and never once felt lonely on it. Now the absence of other vehicles transformed the landscape into something extraterrestrial. The sky was too large. The road was too straight. My truck was the only moving thing in a world that had stopped agreeing to function. The fuel light came on at mile marker 308. I had maybe 30 miles of driving left in the tank. The Montana border was roughly 50 miles ahead. Between here and there, I knew of exactly one fuel option. A 2-pump independent station near the Crow Reservation turnoff that sold gas, jerky, and beadwork to tourists who'd taken a wrong turn looking for the Little Bighorn battlefield. I called Marcus again. No answer. I called Dawn. The call failed to connect. Not a ring, not a voicemail. Just a digital nothing that suggested the network had buckled under the weight of everyone in the northwestern United States trying to reach someone they loved. I was alone with the engine and the math. At mile marker 322, I saw the station. It sat a quarter-mile off the interstate, accessible by a frontage road that curved behind a low ridge. The building was small, cinder block painted turquoise, a flat roof with a faded Conoco sign that hadn't been corporate accurate in 20 years. 2 pumps stood under a minimal canopy. A single vehicle was parked by the building. A white Ford Explorer with a Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks decal on the door. I pulled off the interstate, descended the frontage road, and rolled to a stop beside the nearest pump. The engine ticked as I killed it. The silence that replaced it was aggressive. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of emptiness. A ringing void that pressed against the truck windows like water. I sat for 60 seconds and studied the scene. The Explorer's engine was off. The station's front door was propped open with a rubber wedge. A handwritten cardboard sign in the window read, "Cash only. Power out." If the power was out, the pumps wouldn't work. Not unless the station had a manual override or a generator. I needed to go inside. I reached behind the passenger seat and pulled out the tire iron I kept for roadside emergencies. 22 inches of forged steel with a satisfying weight distribution. I'd never swung it at anything other than a lug nut. I opened the truck door and stepped out. The wind was immediate and cold, carrying the smell of sage and something else. Something chemical and sour that I associated with burnt plastic. It was faint enough to dismiss, strong enough to remember. I crossed the cracked concrete toward the front door, the tire iron hanging at my side. Like a question I wasn't ready to ask, 5 feet from the entrance, I heard a sound from inside. Not a voice, not mechanical, a wet, rhythmic sound, like someone chewing with their mouth open. I stopped. The sound continued. And something in my brainstem, something older than language, told me not to take another step. The thing on the floor of the gas station had been a man about 12 hours ago. I could tell because of the uniform. Olive drab pants, a khaki shirt with a fish, wildlife, and parks patch on the shoulder matching the explorer outside. He'd been large in life. Now he was a geography of ruin, folded against the base of the counter in a position that defied the architecture of a functioning spine. His hands were at his mouth, and the sound I'd heard was him consuming his own forearm with the industrious focus of a dog working a rawhide bone. He hadn't seen me yet. His eyes, if I could call them eyes, they were clouded to the color of spoiled milk, were fixed on his task with a concentration that seemed almost meditative. The door was 5 feet away. I was standing in the threshold. The wind shifted behind me, and I watched his nostrils flare. His head snapped up. The transition was instantaneous, from focused consumption to total predatory attention in the span of a synapse firing. He didn't stand so much as unfold. One leg extended, then the other, and he rose with the jerky mechanical precision of a marionette pulled upward by tangled strings. His jaw hung at an angle that told me it was dislocated or broken. And a sound came from his throat that I can only describe as pressurized air forced through a damaged pipe. I stepped backward. He lunged forward. I swung the tire iron on instinct, not aim, and connected with his collarbone. The impact traveled up the steel and into my wrists with a vibration I felt in my teeth. He staggered sideways, but didn't fall, didn't react to pain. His hand caught the edge of my jacket and pulled with a strength that had no relationship to his degraded body. I twisted free, losing a pocket flap in his grip, and swung again, this time laterally, catching him across the temple. He dropped, not gradually, like a circuit had been interrupted. One moment vertical, then horizontal, then still. I stood over him, breathing in ragged bursts, the tire iron raised for a third strike that didn't come. His chest still moved. Shallow, irregular expansions, like a bellows with a hole in it. But his eyes had closed, and his limbs had gone slack. I had maybe 90 seconds before I lost my nerve entirely. The station's interior was small. A counter, 3 aisles of snacks and sundries, a cooler along the back wall, dark and warm without power. Behind the counter, I found what I needed. A red metal lockbox with a key in it, and taped to the wall beside it, handwritten instructions for manual pump activation. The owner had apparently dealt with enough power outages to create a protocol. Bless the rural West and its preparation for infrastructure failure. I followed the instructions, which involved a mechanical override lever on the side of pump 1, and within 4 minutes I had diesel flowing into my truck's tank. The sound of fuel entering the tank was the most beautiful thing I'd heard since this morning's playlist. While the pump ran, I went back inside, giving the fallen wildlife officer a wide berth, and grabbed what I could carry: 4 bottles of water, a bag of beef jerky, 2 cans of Pringles, a first aid kit hanging behind the counter with a film of dust that suggested it had never been opened, a road atlas, because if cell networks were failing, GPS would eventually follow. I also took the officer's sidearm. I want to be honest about this, because honesty is the only currency I have left. I took a weapon from a man who might have still been alive in some definition of the word. A Glock 22 in a retention holster. 2 additional magazines on his belt. I told myself he wouldn't need it anymore. I told myself he'd want someone to use it properly. I told myself a lot of things while unbuckling a dying man's belt with shaking hands. The pump clicked off at 14 gallons, full tank. I climbed into the truck, locked the doors, and sat with my forehead against the steering wheel until my breathing returned to something that resembled voluntary. Then I drove. Montana welcomed me with a road sign peppered with bullet holes and a sky turning the color of an old bruise. The border itself was invisible. No checkpoint, no change in terrain. But something shifted in my chest when I crossed it. Home state, familiar territory. The irrational animal conviction that I was closer to safety simply because I recognized the soil. That conviction lasted approximately 11 miles. The first cluster appeared on the highway just past the Crow Agency exit. 6 figures walking eastbound in the westbound lane. Walking is generous. They moved with a shuffling momentum that suggested the muscles remembered locomotion, but the brain had forgotten how to coordinate it. They were spread across both lanes in an uneven line, like a search party that had lost its purpose. I was doing 80. They were doing maybe 3 miles an hour. The math gave me a comfortable margin, so I drifted to the far right shoulder and blew past them with 40 feet of clearance. In the rear-view mirror, I watched every single head turn to track my truck. 6 heads, rotating in near unison, following the sound and motion with the synchronized attention of sunflowers tracking light. They didn't chase. They couldn't match the speed. But they turned and they watched. And they began walking in my direction. Slowly, patiently. As if speed were irrelevant when your only remaining function was pursuit. 12 miles later, the second group was larger, maybe 15, clustered around an overturned horse trailer near the median. A dead horse lay beside the trailer, and I will not describe what they were doing to it, except to say that the sound carried through my closed windows at 75 miles per hour. Several of them broke away from the group when my engine noise reached them. They ran. Not fast enough to threaten me at speed, but fast enough to tell me that Dawn's observation was accurate. They moved toward sounds, and some of them could move with purpose. I gripped the steering wheel and did not slow down. Highway 312 appeared as a westbound exit, and I took it with the relieved focus of a man choosing a surgical detour around an open wound. The 2-lane road cut through ranch land, golden and treeless, the Yellowstone River Valley spreading south in a canvas of autumn cottonwoods. Under other circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Now it was terrain, open sight lines, limited cover, predictable road geometry. I was thinking tactically, and the ease with which my brain made that transition frightened me more than the wildlife officer on the gas station floor. My phone buzzed once. A text from Dawn, fragmented by network failure. Still here. Cody sleeping. Counted 12 outside. They don't try dough. The message ended there. Truncated by bandwidth collapse or battery death or something I refused to contemplate. I was 90 minutes from Bozeman. The fuel gauge read full. The Glock sat on the passenger seat with a magazine inserted, and the chamber empty because I wasn't reckless enough to drive on uneven pavement with a loaded weapon bouncing on leather upholstery. The tire iron rested in the footwell. The road atlas lay open to Montana, page 47. With my route traced in a mental line I refreshed every few minutes. I passed through Laurel without incident. The town appeared deserted rather than destroyed. Blinds drawn, doors shut, streets empty with the deliberate vacancy of a community that had received the emergency alert and actually listened. A handmade banner strung across Main Street read, "Residents only. Armed neighborhood watch." I believed them and didn't test it. West of Laurel, I merged onto I-90 and felt the interstate's width like a deep breath. 4 lanes, median, shoulder, room to maneuver, room to see what was coming. What was coming was the city of Billings, visible to the north as a smudge of architecture against the rim rocks. Even from the highway bypass, I could see the smoke, not a single column, but a diffuse haze that suggested multiple uncontrolled fires burning simultaneously, with no one left to respond. I didn't look at it longer than I had to. I kept my eyes west and my foot heavy, and I drove toward my sister. The trouble found me at Livingston, 40 minutes east of Bozeman, where the interstate narrows and the Absaroka Range funnels everything. Wind, weather, traffic, and apparently the walking dead. Through a geographical bottleneck. A jackknifed 18-wheeler blocked both westbound lanes and most of the shoulder. The trailer had split open during the accident, spilling industrial pallets of canned goods across the asphalt in a mockery of abundance. Dented cans of green beans and peaches rolled lazily in the wind. The cab was crushed against the median barrier, its windshield absent, its interior dark. I braked hard and stopped 200 yards from the wreck. Beyond the trailer, I could see daylight. The road was clear on the other side. But the gap between the trailer's rear end and the right guardrail was maybe 8 feet. My truck was 6.5 feet wide. I could make it, barely, if nothing went wrong, if the shoulder was solid, if no one was waiting in the shadow of that trailer. I scanned with the focus of a man whose survival had become an engineering problem. The trailer cast a long shadow across the right shoulder, and within that shadow, I detected movement. Not the wind-driven roll of cans, deliberate movement. A figure crouched beside the trailer's rear wheels, partially hidden by the undercarriage. Then a second figure, standing motionless near the cab. Then a third, sitting on the median barrier, with legs dangling like a child on a dock. Except children don't sit with that preternatural stillness, that vacuum of intention. They hadn't noticed me yet. The wind was blowing east, carrying my engine noise behind me rather than ahead. I had a window measured in seconds. I shifted into reverse and looked for alternatives. The median was a concrete jersey barrier. No crossing. The right shoulder beyond the guardrail dropped into a rocky drainage ditch. Behind me, the last exit had been 3 miles back, leading into Livingston proper, which I'd avoided specifically because small towns with limited exits become kill boxes. My phone vibrated. A single bar of signal. Marcus. Garrett. His voice was stripped to its frame. No warmth, no humor. Just load-bearing structure. Lena's gone. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Marcus. I found her car at the hospital. Doors open, her badge on the ground. I looked inside the building through the ER doors, and they're everywhere, Garrett. Dozens. Maybe 100. Just milling around the hallways like they're waiting for a shift change. Where are you now? Your warehouse. I barricaded the roll-up door with the forklift. I've got the shotgun from the office and about 40 shells. Stay there. I'll come back for you after I get Dawn and Cody. Don't come to Billings. I mean it. The city is gone. I watched a crowd of them take down a National Guard Humvee on King Avenue. They swarmed it, 20, 30, just piling on until the weight tipped it over. The soldiers inside. Marcus, stop. I'm just telling you so you understand what we're dealing with. I understand. I've seen them. Then you know that getting to Bozeman means going through that pass. And if the road is blocked, I'm looking at a blocked road right now. Silence, then. How bad? Jackknifed semi. 3 of them in the shadow. I can maybe squeeze through on the shoulder. But if I get stuck, I'm boxed in. Then don't get stuck. I almost laughed. The flat pragmatism of it. The Marcusness. Don't get stuck. As if the entire collapsing world could be navigated with sufficient commitment to not getting stuck. I'm going through, I said. Call me when you're clear. Marcus, stay alive. That's the current plan. I set the phone down and shifted into drive. I turned off the headlights to reduce visual stimulus. I eased onto the right shoulder, keeping the speedometer at 15. Fast enough to maintain momentum, slow enough to steer precisely. The gap between the trailer and the guardrail grew closer with each second. the shadow deepened. The figure beside the rear wheels shifted its weight. I threaded the needle. My passenger side mirror clipped the trailer's rear corner with a crack that echoed off the canyon walls like a starting pistol. The crouched figure exploded from its position with a velocity I hadn't thought possible. It hit the side of my truck bed before I'd traveled 10 feet. Its hands scrabbling against the camper shell with a sound like a dog clawing at a door during a thunderstorm. In the side mirror, the one still attached, I watched it try to climb. Its fingers found the edge of the shell, and it pulled itself upward with upper body strength that ignored whatever damage the rest of its body had sustained. One of its legs appeared to be broken below the knee, the foot dragging at a perpendicular angle, but it climbed anyway. I accelerated. Hard. The truck surged forward through the canned goods, tires crushing peaches and green beans into a slurry that painted the wheel wells. The second figure, the one by the cab, threw itself at my driver's window as I passed. The impact starred the glass in a spiderweb pattern but didn't break through. I caught a flash of face. Female, middle-aged, wearing a fleece vest embroidered with a logo I couldn't read. Her mouth was open wide enough to suggest the jaw had been restructured for a single purpose. Then I was through. Clear road, open interstate. The speedometer climbing past 60, 70, 80. The thing on my camper shell was still there. I could hear it above me, adjusting its grip as the wind fought to strip it free. At 80 miles per hour, the aerodynamic forces on the truck's exterior were substantial. At 90, the sound changed. The scrabbling became intermittent, then desperate, then absent. I checked the mirror and saw a shape tumbling on the asphalt behind me, rolling and bouncing with a ragdoll physics that confirmed it had lost its grip. I did not slow down to see if it got up. I suspect it did. Bozeman announced itself through the amber glow of a city whose power grid still functioned, at least partially. Streetlights lined the interstate exits. A few buildings downtown were illuminated, but the streets were wrong and not empty like Laurel's deliberate evacuation. These streets had the scattered evidence of interrupted life. Cars stopped at green lights. A grocery store with its automatic doors cycling open and closed on a shopping cart wedged in the threshold. A traffic signal changing colors for an audience of no one. I exited on North 7th and drove surface streets toward Dawn's neighborhood on the city's west side. The residential areas were darker. Many homes had killed their lights, a collective instinct to avoid attention that suggested the community had learned what attracted the infected. I respected it, switching off my headlights and navigating by the residual glow of the overcast sky. Dawn Street was Cottonwood Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac backed against a hillside of mature pines. I'd helped Tyler install a fence here 2 summers ago, the 3 of us spending a weekend sinking posts while Cody supervised from his sandbox with the gravitas of a foreman. I parked 3 houses away and killed the engine. The neighborhood was silent, except for the wind in the pines and a single dog barking with the relentless cadence of an animal that had been barking for hours and would continue until its voice gave out. I counted the visible infected. 2 in the Munoz's front yard, standing in the grass like garden statuary with a malignant upgrade. 1 in the middle of the intersection at the end of the cul-de-sac, swaying slightly in the wind. 1 on the sidewalk directly in front of Dawn's house, facing away from me, its attention fixed on something up the street. 4. Dawn had counted 12 earlier. Where were the other 8? The Glock was in my hand now, a round chambered, the weight of it transforming my right hand into something consequential. I opened the truck doors slowly, placed 1 boot on the pavement, and began the longest walk of my life, 200 yards through a landscape that used to be a neighborhood and was now a hunting ground. I moved between the shadows of parked cars, with a precision born from terror rather than training. Each step was a negotiation between speed and silence silence won every argument. The infected on the sidewalk near Dawn's house stood with its back to me, its head tilted slightly upward as if listening to a frequency I couldn't detect. 20 feet separated us. I could see the individual hairs on the back of its neck, matted with something dark and viscous. I chose the backyard approach. Dawn's property was bordered by a 6-foot cedar fence with a gate that, if Tyler hadn't changed the latch, opened from the outside with a lift and pull mechanism. I circled through the neighbor's side yard, stepping over a garden hose and ducking beneath a clothesline, hung with bed sheets that ghosted in the wind like territorial flags of surrender. The fence gate was where I'd left it. The latch lifted with a metallic click that sounded, in that silence, like a gunshot. I froze, listened. The infected on the sidewalk didn't turn. I slipped through and pulled the gate closed behind me. Dawn's backyard was a small rectangle of grass bordered by raised garden beds Tyler had built from reclaimed cedar. A swing set stood in the corner. Cody's plastic trucks were scattered near the patio in the arrested configuration of play that had ended abruptly. The back door, a sliding glass panel, was closed but uncovered. I could see into the darkened kitchen. I tapped the glass with one knuckle. 3 quick taps, a pause, 2 more. The rhythm Dawn and I had used as kids, knocking on each other's bedroom walls to communicate after lights out. A language from a childhood spent in a house where our parents' arguments turned every evening into an exercise in clandestine solidarity. Nothing happened for 10 seconds. Then a shape moved in the hallway beyond the kitchen, small, cautious. Dawn appeared at the sliding door with a baseball bat in one hand and a flashlight in the other, the beam pointed at the floor. Her face was drawn tight over its bones, every trace of softness replaced by the angular geometry of sustained fear. She looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her, 3 weeks ago at Sunday dinner. She unlocked the slider. I stepped inside. She locked it immediately and wrapped her arms around me with a grip that communicated everything language couldn't. Relief, terror, grief, and the desperate structural dependency of a person who had been holding a building up by herself and couldn't feel her arms anymore. "Where's Cody?" I whispered. "Upstairs, asleep." I gave him half a children's Benadryl because he wouldn't stop asking where Tyler was. "Tyler?" She pulled back. Her eyes answered before her mouth did. I watched from the window. He came out of the Munoz's house, but it wasn't him anymore. He was walking like the others. Mrs. Munoz was behind him, and their son Diego, all 3 of them walking into the street with that drift. "Dawn, I'm sorry." "Don't. Not yet. I can't afford to feel it yet." I understood. Grief is a luxury that requires safety, and safety had been revoked. "We need to leave," I said. "I have a full tank, supplies in the truck. Marcus is alive in Billings, with weapons and a defensible position. We collect him and head north. My friend, Ray Caldwell, has a ranch property outside Great Falls, off-grid, fenced, well water. I called him yesterday before everything went down. He was already prepping. The streets are full of them. I counted 4 on your block. I got in without being detected. We can get out the same way. With a 4-year-old. The weight of that sentence settled on us both. A sleeping child. 200 yards to the truck. 4 known infected. 8 unaccounted for. The math was different now. The margin for error had shrunk from slim to surgical. "I'll carry him," I said. "You walk ahead with the bat. We go out the back gate, through the Henderson's yard, and circle to the truck. No lights, no sound." Dawn looked at the ceiling, calculating the risk of waking her son into this nightmare. Then she nodded. Cody woke up confused and warm, his small body folding against my chest with the automatic trust of a child who associates being carried with safety. Dawn had dressed him in dark clothes and Velcro shoes, no laces to trip on, no bright colors to attract attention. She'd thought of it before I arrived. My sister had always been the practical one. I was the one who drove into danger on a quarter tank. She was the one who packed a go-bag while the world ended. We moved through the backyard in a single-file procession. Dawn first with the bat, me following with Cody pressed against my shoulder, one arm supporting his weight and the other holding the Glock at my side. The night had deepened while I was inside, and the cloud cover erased whatever moonlight might have helped. We navigated by memory and the faint ambient glow of Bozeman's surviving grid. The back gate opened silently this time. Dawn had applied cooking oil to the hinges while waiting. Another detail that made me realize she'd been preparing for extraction long before I arrived. We slipped into the Hendersons' yard and immediately encountered our first problem. The Hendersons owned a German shepherd named Blitz. Blitz was alive, unchained, and standing in the center of the yard with his hackles raised and a low growl building in his chest like tectonic pressure. He was facing us, but his aggression wasn't directed at us. It was directed past us, at the fence line we'd just come through. Something on the other side of the fence had his attention. Dawn crouched slowly and extended her hand. "Blitz, hey buddy." Quiet. The dog's growl subsided to a whine. He knew Dawn. She'd fed him treats over the fence for 3 years. He approached her hand, licked it once, then returned his attention to the fence with an intensity that made my spine compress. A shadow moved along the top of the cedar planks. Something was running its hand along the fence, tracing the boundary, searching for the gate the way a blind person reads a wall. I heard fingernails scraping wood. We moved, fast and low, across the Hendersons' yard to the side gate that opened onto the street. Dawn lifted the latch while I shifted Cody higher on my shoulder. He stirred, murmured something about trucks, and settled back against my neck. The street was empty in our immediate vicinity. The infected I'd seen earlier at the intersection had moved. I could hear it somewhere to the east, the distinctive arrhythmic footfall of damaged locomotion on pavement. The two in the Munoz's yard were gone, relocated by whatever stimulus governed their movement. My truck was parked 150 feet to the right, visible as a dark mass against the slightly less dark backdrop of the street. We walked toward it at a pace that agonized every instinct, screaming for speed. At 75 feet, Cody sneezed. The sound was small, a child's sneeze, delicate, almost cute under any other circumstances. It traveled through the still night air with the efficiency of a flare. From 3 different directions, I heard movement begin, not gradual, instantaneous. The sound of bodies pivoting and feet striking pavement, orienting on our position with the certainty of a compass needle. Finding north. "Run," I said. Dawn sprinted. I followed, Cody now fully awake and clinging to me with arms that had gone rigid with fear. He didn't scream. 4 years old. And he'd already learned that screaming drew the wrong kind of attention. That fact alone was enough to shatter something inside me that I haven't been able to reassemble since. I reached the truck, ripped open the rear door, and deposited Cody on the back seat. Dawn was already at the passenger side. I rounded the hood, fumbled the keys. A fumble that lasted perhaps 2 seconds and felt like 2 centuries, and got the engine turning over. Headlights on. The beams illuminated Cottonwood Lane with a clarity I immediately wished I could revoke. 11 figures stood in the road ahead of us, clustered in a loose semicircle 20 yards from the bumper. Their eyes caught the light and reflected it back with a milky luminescence that made them look like something dredged from deep water. I put the truck in reverse. The truck screamed backward through the cul-de-sac at 30 miles per hour, a speed that turned the steering wheel into a wrestling opponent. I had one hand on the wheel and the other on the headrest behind me, twisting to see through the rear window where the darkness offered only the suggestion of obstacles. We hit the curb once, a jarring impact that bounced Cody sideways, then cleared the intersection, and I swung the wheel hard, converting the reverse momentum into a forward arc that pointed us east on Durston Road. Dawn was bracing herself against the dashboard. Cody was on the floor behind the passenger seat, curled into a ball with his hands over his ears. Neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. The truck's acceleration was its own language. I took side streets at speed, running 2 stop signs and a red light without the slightest moral hesitation. The infected were sporadic but present. Individual figures turning toward the sound of my engine. Some stepping into the road, most unable to close the distance before I'd already passed. I clipped one with the driver's side mirror at the intersection of Wilson and Main. The mirror folded inward and then snapped back. In the rear view, the figure spun and fell. I did not check whether it rose. We reached the I-90 on-ramp and merged east with the gas needle steady on full. Bozeman fell behind us in the mirror, its light still burning over streets that belonged to the dead. Billings is 2.5 hours, I said, my voice strange in the sudden quiet of the highway driving. Marcus is at the warehouse. We grab him, resupply, and head north. Dawn was silent for a long moment. Then, Tyler's back there. Dawn. I know he's not Tyler anymore. I watched him walk out of that house with someone else's blood on his shirt, and I knew. But he's back there, and I'm leaving. And Cody is going to wake up tomorrow and ask me where his dad is, and I don't have a single word prepared for that conversation. We'll find the words. Will we? What words cover this, Garrett? What combination of sounds explains to a 4-year-old that his father tried to help the neighbors and became a monster for it? What bedtime story handles that? I had nothing. Not silence out of weakness. Silence out of the absolute vacuum, where an adequate response should have existed and didn't. My sister deserved better than platitudes, and the truth was a blade I couldn't hand her while she was already bleeding. Cody climbed up from the footwell onto the seat, his face puffy with tears. He'd been crying silently. Garbear, are the bad people gone? They're behind us, buddy. Are we going to Uncle Marcus's? Yeah, we're going to see Uncle Marcus. Is he going to make us pancakes? The question was so perfectly, devastatingly 4 years old that I felt my throat close. Marcus made pancakes every time Cody visited the warehouse. A portable griddle on the break room counter, chocolate chips shaped into smiley faces. It was their ritual. I bet he will, I said. Cody accepted this with the absolute faith of a child for whom pancakes remained a reliable constant in a world where everything else had shifted. He curled against Dawn's side and closed his eyes. I drove. The interstate was a dark river running east, and we were the only vessel on it. The headlights carved a tunnel through the night, revealing nothing ahead but pavement and the reflective eyes of deer standing in the median, alive, unconcerned, occupying a parallel existence in which the human crisis was simply an increase in available territory. At the halfway point, I turned on the radio. Static across the AM band. Static on FM. One signal, faint and repeating, broadcasting on what sounded like an emergency frequency. A recorded voice reading GPS coordinates, followed by the phrase, "Civilian shelter point active." I wrote the coordinates on the back of a gas receipt with a pen from the glove box. Insurance against the plan falling apart. Plans were falling apart regularly now. We reached the Billings outskirts at 11:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I checked the dashboard clock obsessively during the final approach, as if precise temporal awareness could substitute for the control I'd lost over everything else. The city's southern approach on I-90 looked like the aftermath of a parade organized by catastrophe. Vehicles lined the shoulder in both directions. Some parked deliberately, others clearly abandoned in mid-transit. Doors open, engines dead. A school bus sat on the median with its stop sign still extended. The red lights long darkened, its interior invisible behind tinted windows. I chose not to investigate. I exited on King Avenue, the route Marcus and I drove daily to reach the warehouse district south of the rail yard. The streetlights were out here. The grid had failed in this section of the city, and the only illumination came from my headlights and the distant orange pulse of fires burning in the downtown core. The warehouse was on a dead-end street flanked by auto salvage yards and a concrete plant. As industrial settings go, it was ugly and perfect. High fences, limited access points, no residential neighbors to complicate the dynamics. Marcus and I had leased the 4,000 square foot metal building for its roll-up door and its proximity to the rail spur, where we occasionally shipped larger loads. I turned onto the access road and immediately saw the barricade. Marcus had parked the company forklift sideways across the roll-up door and stacked pallets of copper wire bales against the gap. The personnel door on the building's east side was reinforced with what appeared to be steel shelving units bolted across it from inside. A dim light glowed through the clear-story windows near the roofline. I flashed my headlights 3 times. 2 seconds later, the clear-story light flicked off and on twice. Our signal. Marcus was alive and watching. I parked the truck tight against the building's west wall, creating a natural channel between the truck and the metal siding that was too narrow for more than one person to walk through. I killed the engine and the lights simultaneously. We sat in darkness. "Stay here," I told Dawn. "Lock the doors. If anything moves that isn't me or Marcus, you put this truck in drive and don't look back." "Garrett." 90 seconds. I'll have the side door open. I exited the truck and moved to the east side personnel door. I knocked. 3. Pause. 2. The same rhythm from childhood, the same rhythm from Dawn's back door. Marcus had learned it from me years ago, and hearing the deadbolt slide from inside confirmed he remembered. The door opened 6 inches, blocked by a chain. Marcus's face appeared in the gap, half lit by a lantern somewhere behind him. He looked like grief had taken a belt sander to him. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw set at the angle of a man who had decided not to break down until he was certain the breaking wouldn't be permanent. "You brought Dawn?" "And Cody." He closed his eyes, nodded, unhooked the chain. Inside, the warehouse was transformed. Marcus had been busy. The copper wire bales that constituted our inventory were stacked along the walls like battlements. The break room had been converted into a sleeping area with cots pulled from the supply room. Water containers, the 5-gallon jugs we kept for the job sites, were lined against the back wall. A battery-powered radio sat on the workbench, scanning frequencies in an endless sweep of static and silence. "I found something," Marcus said, leading me to the workbench. He handed me a handheld VHF radio. "Fish and wildlife frequency. There's a guy broadcasting from a fire lookout tower in the Crazies, the mountain range west of here. Name's Sullivan, former Forest Service. He's been tracking movement patterns from elevation." "Movement patterns?" "The infected. They migrate. Sullivan says they follow noise and light, But when there's no stimulus, they drift south, like a current. Every night, the concentration in the Billings metro shifts southward by about a mile. He thinks it's thermal. They move toward warmth. Dawn appeared in the doorway, Cody asleep on her shoulder. Marcus looked at her, and his face did something I'd never seen from him. It crumpled briefly, before he rebuilt it. "I'll make pancakes," he said. We stayed at the warehouse for 31 hours, and in that time, the world finished its transition from crisis to condition. Sullivan's broadcasts became our primary intelligence source. His voice was calm and methodical, the practiced cadence of a man who'd spent decades reporting fire conditions and weather data to dispatch offices. He'd adapted that discipline to this new purpose with an efficiency that made me believe competence might be humanity's most durable trait. Billings Metro, Sunset Report. He'd begin each evening. Visual count from Tower 7, Crazy Mountains. Estimated infected visible in the valley floor, 400 plus. Movement trending south-southwest at approximately 0.8 miles per hour. Concentration highest along the Yellowstone River corridor. Infrastructure fires visible in the Heights district. No organized military or law enforcement activity observed. Next report at dawn. 400 visible from his vantage point meant thousands in the city. The math was relentless. Marcus and I spent the first night inventorying everything in the warehouse that had survival value. Beyond the copper. Useless now except as barricade material. We had tools, fuel for the forklift, a portable generator with 8 gallons of gasoline, the break room supply of canned coffee and vending machine snacks, and a comprehensive first aid kit I'd purchased when an employee had cut his hand on stripped wire and we'd realized our workers' comp response plan was drive to the ER. Dawn focused on Cody. She constructed a routine for him with the architectural precision of someone who understood that a child's sanity depends on predictability. Wake up, breakfast. Crackers with peanut butter from the vending machine. School time. Dawn quizzing him on letters and numbers using a whiteboard from the office. Lunch, nap. Afternoon play with improvised toys assembled from office supplies. Dinner, story time, bed. The routine was a fortress built of hours, and it kept Cody functional while the adults processed their new reality in the margins. On the second morning, Marcus made a decision. He'd been quiet since our arrival, his conversation limited to logistics, and the occasional dark observation delivered with the ghost of his former humor. But that morning, he sat across from me at the break room table while Dawn slept and said the thing that changed our trajectory. I went to the hospital. You told me. I didn't tell you everything. I went inside. I looked at him. He met my eyes with a steadiness that cost him something visible. I found Lena's station, 4th floor, cardiac wing. Her name tag was on the counter. Her shoes were under the desk. She always changed into those Crocs for her shift. The blue ones with the stupid charms on them. Marcus? She wasn't there. Not alive, not like the others. She wasn't there at all. No blood at her station, no signs of struggle. She might have gotten out through the stairwell. I found a fire exit door propped open on the ground floor, on the side facing the parking structure. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't have a body. I'm saying the last time I spoke to my wife, she was alive and competent and barricading a trauma wing with filing cabinets. A woman who does that doesn't just get caught. You think she's alive. I think there's a possibility I'm not ready to abandon. I thought about the decision tree this created. We had a plan. North to Ray Caldwell's ranch, off-grid, defensible, sustainable. That plan didn't include a detour back into a city of thousands of infected to search for someone who might be alive, might be dead, might be something in between. If she got out, where would she go? I asked. Her sister's place, Carol. She lives on the West End, near the Rimrock Mall. Lena and I had a conversation once. Hypothetical, one of those what-if talks couples have after watching too many disaster movies. We agreed. If we got separated, meet at Carol's. 2-story house, brick exterior, good sight lines. I studied the map. Carol's house was 11 miles from the warehouse, through the urban core of a city Sullivan estimated contained thousands of infected. We go at dawn, I said. The migration pattern moves them south at night. By sunrise, the northern routes should be thinner. Marcus's hand found my shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. We left Dawn and Cody at the warehouse with the shotgun. 4 shells, instructions to barricade the personnel door behind us, and a promise that we'd be back before noon or not at all. Dawn accepted these terms with the pragmatic clarity that had replaced her grief, a transformation I recognized because I'd undergone it myself. The metabolic conversion of sorrow into operational focus. Marcus drove, I navigated. We took his personal vehicle, a Chevy Tahoe with tinted windows and a brush guard that gave it the profile of something unwilling to stop for obstacles. We ran dark. No headlights. Using the pre-dawn gray to navigate streets we'd driven hundreds of times under circumstances that now seemed fictional in their normalcy. The northern route through Billings followed Shiloh Road to Grand Avenue, cutting through commercial districts that were deserted but structurally intact. The infected were sparse at this hour, confirming Sullivan's southward migration theory. We saw 3 in the first mile, all stationary, all oriented south, standing in the parking lot of a hardware store like a congregation awaiting a sermon. They didn't react to the Tahoe's passage at low speed. Sullivan said sound activates them at a range of about 200 yards, Marcus said, keeping his voice low even inside the vehicle. Below 30 miles per hour, engine noise drops under their threshold in open air. And in residential areas, sound reflects off buildings. Then we go slower. We crept through Billings at 15 miles per hour, ghosts in a Tahoe, threading a city that had become a reef of stalled vehicles and shattered glass. Evidence of the collapse was everywhere. Storefronts with their windows punched inward, fire hydrants knocked open by impact with water still flowing into gutters. A police cruiser with its light bar on and its battery dying. The red and blue pulsing weakly like a heartbeat in hospice. Carol's neighborhood was upscale by Billings standards. Brick homes set back from the street with mature landscaping and 2-car garages. The kind of street where people installed security systems to protect property and never imagined they'd need protection from their neighbors' bodies. The house was the third on the left, and we saw the signal before we turned the corner. A bedsheet hanging from the second-floor window, spray-painted with a single word in red. Alive. Marcus exhaled like a man surfacing from deep water. We parked in the driveway behind a Subaru with a hospital parking pass on the mirror. Marcus was out of the vehicle before I'd engaged the parking brake. He crossed the lawn in 4 strides and knocked. Not our pattern, just knocked, because his hands were shaking too badly for code. The front door opened, and Lena Holloway stood in the threshold wearing surgical scrubs streaked with someone else's blood, and an expression that collapsed the moment she saw her husband. She reached for him, and he reached for her. And they held each other in that doorway with an intensity that made me look away, because some moments are so private that even witnessing them feels like theft. Behind Lena, another figure appeared. Carol. A shorter, rounder version of Lena, mid-50s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. And behind Carol, a surprise that reorganized my understanding of the situation. 3 other survivors. A teenager named Kai, maybe 16, wearing a Billings West High basketball jersey. An older man named Gerald, retired, with a hearing aid and a lever-action rifle that looked like it had been in his family since statehood. And a woman named Priya, early 30s, an IT contractor who'd been stranded at a client site downtown when the collapse hit and had navigated 3 miles on foot to reach Carol's after seeing the bedsheets signal from the street. 7 survivors, 3 vehicles between us, a defensible warehouse with supplies for a few days, a ranch property 200 miles north with water, fences, and a man named Ray who'd been preparing for something like this for 20 years. "We need to go," I said. And for the first time, no one argued with the simplicity of the statement. The convoy left Billings at 7:14 a.m. under a sky the color of pewter, 3 vehicles in a line. My Ram leading, Marcus's Tahoe in the middle carrying Lena, Carol, and Priya, and Gerald's ancient Ford Bronco bringing up the rear with Kai riding shotgun. We took Highway 87 north, avoiding the interstate on Sullivan's advice. He'd reported a large concentration of infected near the I-90/187 interchange, possibly drawn by a truck fire that had been burning uncontrolled for 2 days. Sullivan himself was our final extraction. The Crazy Mountains Fire Lookout was roughly 30 miles east of our route north. We'd arranged over the radio to detour, collect him, and absorb him into our group. His knowledge of terrain and infected movement patterns made him invaluable, a strategic asset wrapped in a Forest Service fleece. The first hour was uneventful in the way that driving through the end of the world becomes, paradoxically, routine. The infected were present but manageable. Small groups drawn to the highway's shoulder by the remnants of previous traffic, easily avoided its speed. The landscape outside Billings opened into the rolling grassland of central Montana, enormous and indifferent, the kind of space that makes human concerns feel appropriately small. Cody sat in his car seat behind me, narrating the drive with a stream of consciousness commentary of a 4-year-old attempting to process an incomprehensible situation through the only framework he possessed. "That cow is sleeping in the road, Garbear. Why is that car upside down? Is that man walking funny because he hurt his leg?" I answered each question with a version of truth carefully pruned to fit inside a child's capacity for horror. The cow was resting. The car had an accident. The man was sick. Dawn, in the passenger seat, stared straight ahead and let me handle it. I understood. She was conserving whatever remained of her capacity for deception because Cody was going to ask about Tyler eventually. And that answer would require every ounce of narrative construction she possessed. The detour to Sullivan's Tower took us off the highway and onto a Forest Service road that climbed into the Crazies through lodgepole pine and granite outcrops. The air cooled noticeably with elevation, and the radio crackled with Sullivan's voice guiding us through switchbacks. "Left at the fork. The road gets rough for a 1/4 mile, but it's passable in your vehicles. I can see you from the tower. 3 rigs, correct?" 3 rigs, I confirmed. "No infected visible on the road. I've been clear up here for 48 hours. Elevation seems to deter them. Confirms the thermal theory. They don't climb." We reached the tower. A classic fire lookout on a steel frame, 60 feet above the ridgeline with 360-degree visibility. Sullivan descended the stairs carrying a pack, a bolt-action rifle, and a calm competence that immediately made the group feel more capable. He was 50-something, lean, with a gray beard and the sunburned squint of a man who'd spent his life watching horizons for smoke. He shook my hand, nodded at Marcus, and climbed into the Bronco with Gerald. "The ranch is about 4 hours north," I told the group through the open windows of our vehicles. "Ray Caldwell's property. 300 acres, well water, perimeter fencing, solar panels. He's expecting us." How do we know the road is clear? Priya asked from the Tahoe's back seat. We don't, Sullivan answered. But the infected concentrate in valleys and urban centers. We're going through open range. Population density out here was low before the collapse. The math favors us. The math. Everything came back to math now. Distance, fuel, population density, sound radius, speed versus pursuit velocity. Survival had become an equation, and the variables were constantly shifting. We pulled back onto the highway in formation. 8 people, 1 child, 3 vehicles, and a destination that represented not safety. I'd stopped believing in safety, but the possibility of something durable, something that could be maintained while we figured out whether the world was ending or merely transforming. The mountains rose ahead of us, and I drove toward them. Ray Caldwell met us at the gate with a rifle across his chest and tears in his eyes. He counted heads, said 8, 9 souls, that'll do, and opened the fence. That was 47 days ago. I'm writing this from the upstairs room of Ray's farmhouse, looking out at a valley where the nearest infected is, according to Sullivan's morning scan, 11 miles south and moving away from us. The fence holds. The well pumps. The generator runs 4 hours a day. Marcus built a chicken coop from salvaged lumber. Dawn planted a garden using seeds from Carol's emergency kit. Cody named every chicken and insists on saying goodnight to each one individually, which takes roughly 15 minutes and is the best part of every evening. I don't know what's happening in the cities. I don't know if there's a government. I don't know if this is temporary or permanent, a plague or an extinction. What I know is this. I was driving alone on a highway with a quarter tank of gas, and I made every wrong decision except the ones that mattered. I kept going. I kept choosing people over plans. The fuel gauge reads full. The road is still out there. We're still here. If you enjoyed the story, let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear new stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon.